Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Kaizen Synergy COVIDSafe Legal Compliance webinar. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. This session is part 2 of the How to Hold a COVID-Safe Event. We thought it was necessary to look at extending this because as agencies continue to work in what is being called a COVID normal setting, agencies, especially in the not-for-profit sector, are looking at community events, group classes, and client visits. And as the rules and laws start to ease or change, what we are seeing is some confusion around what can be done, what are the requirements, but also how do you actually manage this process as well too. Today's session follows on from the last session that we held, so that's why we're calling it part 2. We will be retreading some of the previous sessions' work as well too, in order to build upon where we're heading today as well too. We will look at specifically also the recent rule changes that has occurred over the past 1 to 2 weeks as well too, and really some of the impacts that this has for agencies as well. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being recorded and run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's have a look at today's agenda. During the webinar, we will cover what is a COVID-safe event. We will look at what do you need to think about, look at what do you need to do, and what are the rules and new rules around these as well too. We'll also show you what other agencies are doing. And there's a handful of agencies that we will focus on as well too, and show you what this looks like and how this works for agencies as well. With it, we will also be showing you and giving you some background around, well, what is the resources that are available to you. You will get a timely collection of resources this afternoon, which will include these PowerPoint slides, will include also examples and case examples of what other agencies have been doing since February. And also any other reference material that we will send out to you as well too. Certainly, as being part of the COVID normal and COVID safe events, as we return to work and businesses reopen, we're seeing that around the country. There is the need to ensure that you have robust compliance systems and policies in place to ensure that this is all supported. We are getting just a couple of questions, administrative questions, that I'm just going to ask the support desk to respond to, and I'll put you on hold for literally 5 seconds. All right, back again. So let's have a look at the other parts of this. Now, a few housekeeping items that we've always mentioned in our COVID-safe webinars. These are all recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. We are more than happy to stay on the line and answer any questions that you might have. You can also raise questions throughout the webinar in our chat line, and a number of people have already started to do that already. The webinars will be published on our Gemba 360 YouTube channel, which is our public channel that we have loaded all our past webinars on as well too. And with that, you can see that if I drag that over for you to see here as well too, and that has a list of all our past webinars that are available to you as well. That said, we've also got a knowledge base that is also available too, and that's on our law firm website, kaizensynergy.com. And yes, that is a photo of me that's on the website as well. You can see the knowledge base that we have also pressed on here. and this gives you access to a number of our past key webinars that we have run, as well as the other resources as well. And it is also the spot where you can access your COVIDSafe Dashboard, which I will come to as well too. All of the materials that we refer to, including these slides, will also be circulated out this afternoon to all attendees. So let's have a look at the COVIDSafe events and broadly what we are covering off, and then let's jump into some of the rules changes that relates to your agency. And we've summarized these down into relevant states and territories as well. So there are a number of COVID rules that apply to community events, group classes, and client visits. And essentially this covers the broad services that agencies like yourselves run across the not-for-profit sector. So if hosting a COVIDSafe event, event organizers should monitor the list of approved COVIDSafe industry plans to determine whether your event or specific parts of your event is covered in part by these as well. Essentially, the rules are that event organizers must ensure compliance with these COVIDSafe industry rules for the relevant components of your event. Now, when we look at the different states, and we're just going to run through these individually and circulate right around the country as well too. And we are getting some questions which I'll come to as well too around mask wearing. Thank you, Judy. So essentially, in New South Wales, it has opened the Victorian-New South Wales border as of 12:01 a.m. on Monday, the 23rd of November. Weddings and funerals can include up to 300 guests now. From 1st of December 2020, the number of people who can attend a wedding or a funeral increases up to 300, subject to relevant density limits, and I'll come to that as well too. Up to 20 visitors may visit another household at any one time. The total number of visitors includes adults and children, and a member of the household is not counted as a visitor. In addition, there is no daily limits to visitors to your home, so long as you do not have more than 20 visitors at any one time. Now, if you are over 70 and have a pre-existing medical condition, you should look at limiting the number of visitors and take care at all times, is what the department essentially has provided its direction to. An overnight stay as part of a visit to someone's household is currently allowed as well too. And if there are more than 20 visitors at a home, every person will be held individually responsible for a breach of the New South Wales Public Health Order. And at the current time, while these restrictions are in place, the New South Wales Chief Health Officer recommends a COVIDSafe precautionary approach of having no more than 10 visitors at any one point in time. Now, this extends to outdoor gatherings in New South Wales as well too, where under the Public Health Order, there are restrictions on people from different households meeting together in a public place, and this is defined in the Summary of Offences Act as well too, where it's actually grounded. So no more than 30 people can gather outside in a public place, which includes public parks, reserves, beaches, public gardens, and spaces. And under the public order, gathering means an assembly of persons for a common purpose in a public place. Now, the maximum of 30 people doesn't apply to a group of persons who are in the same household, but also for community sporting events, outdoor music performances, and these other activities as well. So you can see that there are some exemptions that do apply in this case. In Victoria, in contrast, face masks do remain mandatory in some settings unless you have a lawful reason not to wear it. However, face masks are no longer mandatory when you're outdoors if you can stay 1.5 meters away from people that you don't live with. The use of face masks outdoors is required if you are unable to stay 1.5 meters away from people you don't live with, such as in public transport stations, outdoor markets, walkways, and thoroughfares, etc. But you must continue to carry a face mask with you at any time, as the law currently sits at the moment. Now, I will just come to Judy's question in the questions bar, who has just asked, what mask wearing in a meeting of about 10 people, we will be very far away from some people. As a professional voice user and teacher, I'm concerned about vocal fatigue and long-term possible damage. Is it acceptable to remove one's face mask when one is actually speaking in a meeting? Judy, if you can let me know where you are currently based as well too, then we can look at answering that question for you. Certainly in Victoria at the moment, when you look at these rules here around it, it does talk about face mask. Yeah, thanks, Judy. Judy's just said Judy's based in Melbourne. So with it, what we currently see as of at the moment in Victoria, with the current rules around face masks, and this is why I held off until this question and part of the slides. Essentially, it says face masks are mandatory in some settings. This would be a setting where potentially it is mandatory. If you can maintain the 1.5 meters space when you are out, if it is outdoors. If it is indoors, then you do need to look at other requirements, and currently face masks aren't required in some circumstances, and if you are talking, then you can use it, and you might have seen these already in cafes in Melbourne as well too, with the premises that you are essentially maintaining the social distance that you are seeing. And we're currently seeing that in other settings as well too, specifically in cafes and other community-based services as well. In Victoria also, for community services, which are reopening as well too, for gatherings in libraries, toy libraries, and other community facilities, can open for up to 150 people indoors and up to 300 people in outdoor spaces as well too. No more than 20 people can gather in a group in an indoor space, for example, for a class, and up to 50 people in a group for an outdoor space. So going back to Judy's people around this, then again, what we're looking at is smaller spaces can have a small number of people, where we're talking about no more than 20 people can gather in a group in an indoor space, for example, like a class. And this information has been taken directly from the Department of Health and Human Services directives as well. So with it, looking at other requirements, moving back, community services and local government facilities in Victoria can operate as follows, and we've listed those here, covering community facilities such as community centres, halls, men's sheds, public libraries, youth centres, police centres, community hubs, and also RSL clubs as well too. In South Australia, they've recently had a lockdown in terms of responding to a COVID outbreak, and there were new density limits in place. The total number of people at a place must not exceed one person per 4 square metres, and you'll see this particular requirement filtering through other directives that we've also seen across different states and territories. There is also physical distancing or social distancing principles that apply, and wearing a face mask in South Australia is not mandatory, but is recommended to wear a mask when out in public if you are unable to physically distance as well. All gatherings must observe the new maximum density requirements of 10 people regardless of age, unless 10 people permanently live there, and private gatherings other than residents are capped at 50 and must be observed as well too. With it, there are a number of questions coming through specifically relating to Christmas and festive gatherings leading into December, and I'll actually cover those as in the upcoming slides around social gatherings and summarize these down specifically for each state and territory. But some of the general rules for now, looking at each of the areas around community services, groups, and events, essentially just to mapped these out for you. Finally, South Australia has these specific requirements for funerals and weddings going up to 150 people. Church services are capped at 100 of what we are seeing. In Queensland, it is slightly different again. And as of the Tuesday, the 17th of November, we've got specific and quite direct items that are listed here for these types of events. And you can see that it's limited to gatherings, defined by gatherings, indoor premises, weddings, indoor events, outdoor events, and it does range from from 40 to 50 people, covering right across to even outdoor events with 1,000 to 1,500 people, and what the requirements are as well. In WA, there is still the measures of controlled interstate borders and measures, but essentially the 2 square metre rule applies here, and there is strict restrictions on WA's controlled interstate border. We're not going to cover off the legal, and I can see a few people have questions on some of the legal rights, is what someone has just put in the question panel around the WA borders. We're not going to cover that here. More than happy to have a conversation with you offline around it. But in saying that, what we're looking at here is how did the current laws, whether they're, I'm going to say in inverted commas, right or wrong, what they currently apply and what the rules are as they stand. So with it, it's really looking at how and what the applications of them currently are, rather than whether or not they are appropriately justified or not. It's not something we drift into in these webinars. So the WA businesses are expected to ensure their COVID-safe plans are updated and continue to be implemented as well too. In Tasmania, the gathering limits are now determined by the density of the area, and you'll see this move with a number of other states as well too, of 250 people for undivided spaces versus 1,000 people in outdoor spaces as well too. In Northern Territory, there is a much broader response to this, where they have events of up to 100 people do not require a checklist or safety plan. However, physical distancing and hygiene principles should be considered. If it is above 500, then what you'll actually see is specific requirements coming in. We haven't covered that in this slide, but just to let you know, we do have a number of agencies joining us from the NT, and also a number of agencies that provide support services into the territory as well too. And for that reason, we are actually covering those specifically here. With it, what you will find across the board in all of these states and territories is this need for your COVID safe plans to be continuously updated. And I'll come to what those should look like and give you some case studies of what has worked for other agencies and really continues to work as well. Now, we have got a lot of questions coming through around the festive parties in December. So I'm actually preempted that and going to just summarize these down into these slides for you. And somebody's just asked around that, will we get copies of these slides? Absolutely, you'll get copies of all of these slides circulated to you this afternoon, along with all of the other resources. So essentially, let's summarize these down. In New South Wales, if you're based in New South Wales, you can currently have up to 20 visitors in your home. And again, the people who live in your household don't count towards those numbers. Everyone in the venue has to be seated in the total capacity of venues, 1 person per 4 square meters inside and 2 per square meters outside. There is the QR code check-ins, and we actually raised this last week already, and we'll show you how some agencies are doing it very effectively. And QR code check-ins will be mandatory for hospitality businesses in New South Wales by Christmas. And I'll show you how you can actually do that yourselves. And also with the Gembar 360 platform, link that to your system and your compliance and COVID safe plan. I'll show you how agencies have done that. In Victoria, the change will come into effect, or plan to come into effect, from 14th of December. So pre-Christmas catch-ups are now a possibility. Right now, Victorians can have up to 15 visitors to their home, and up to 50 people can gather in an outdoor workspace. So what we are suggesting, if some agencies based in Victoria want to have a pre-Christmas catch-up, looking at the current rules in place, an outdoor catch-up might be the better way to manage this, if that's the way that your workplace would like to do it. The QR codes, again, will be mandatory. This is coming directly from the department. And also bigger venues, density limits will stay the same, but the cap will increase up to 150, with the total venue capacity also rise eventually to 300. In Queensland, there is the 40 to 50 person limit, which includes members of the household. There are restrictions in indoor venues like restaurants and cafes have relaxed to allow one person per 2 square metres, but the government hasn't flagged any further relaxations before Christmas either. In South Australia, the total number of people must not exceed one person per 4 square metres. 10 people can gather at a private home, while 50 can be at a private venue other than a residence. And then there are other easing off restrictions around pubs and clubs, capped at 100 people with a maximum booking size of 10. So with it, you can also see in Tassie as well too, there are changes of up to 40 people, but undivided spaces up to 1,000, and Western Australia has restrictions in place. That means a one person per 2 square metre rule applies to gatherings. So you can see that there is a number of variations around different states and territories. With it, finally, in ACT and Northern Territory, there are no limits in the ACT of how many people can visit your home, but distancing of 1.5 metres. And the Northern Territory, there are no limits on household gatherings, but people are encouraged to keep a 1.5 metre distance for those that don't live there as well. I can also see that, and I'll just raise this as well too, we're going to just walk you through what some other agencies have done, specifically around QR codes, and our reference to Women's Housing Limited, and thank Judy Lyne, who's the Chief Executive Officer out there, and also acknowledge the work that Lena Tompkinson has also done at Women's Housing over the last number of months, and they've actually rolled out QR codes for visitors and guests, and I'll actually show you how that works. Rumballara Aboriginal Corporation, and I also acknowledge Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer out there, in terms of how that works. And with that, the role that and what they've done in terms of managing that process through. I will just also raise a question that has come through, and I can see that more than happy to keep these questions coming through because it is important for us to address these. I will just raise from Sonia around from a religious aid national agency that works across Australia. Just raised the question, our organisation provides speakers for events. Despite the venue having supplied us with their COVID plan, when our people arrive, the venue is not adhering to their own COVID plan. How do you suggest this issue is handled without damaging the relationship between the two parties? If you could provide some guidance on it. That's a really good question, Sonia, around it. And look, I'll pick that question out when you have a agency like yourselves that work across Australia and you've got a COVID-safe plan coming from another agency, but you have identified the issue of what a number of agencies have seen where people are not complying and other agencies aren't complying with their own COVID-safe plan, and what do you actually do around it? What we have suggested to people to do, obviously there is the legal point of view to take, and generally the initial response that people ask us on is, well, can we point out what their legal responsibility is and issues and work health and safety and report them and all this, but as you point out, it damages the relationship. Often what we point out is that sometimes agencies, because of everything that's going on, may simply not be aware that there is a COVID-safe plan breach. We advocate for taking that step first because it builds actually the relationship between you and the other agency. If you've actually identified that there is a gap or that they're not complying with their COVID-safe plan, before getting to a legal route around it, our actually response, and it seems counterintuitive for us to say, don't take a legal response first when we are a law firm. But we find that actually, especially in the community services and not-for-profit sector, it's all about relationships. And if you can work with the agency around that and identify what the issue actually is, raise it to the relevant person, then that would be a much easier step for both parties to take. Obviously, if they don't understand what the impact and risk is, then yes, there is an obligation on your agency, if you've identified that they haven't met their COVIDSafe plan, to actually take a more of a formal notification via written email and the likes around that. And then obviously, if it still doesn't happen, then maybe move to another venue or agency partnership for an interim period of time, or effectively then go down the legal route. But I'd almost recommend, in taking that 1 or 2 step approach, as I said, it sounds a bit counterintuitive for a law firm to say, don't use the law to go down that path. But as a law firm, what we find, it's especially in the not-for-profit sector, it's about maintaining that relationship and working together, especially around this COVIDSafe plan work. So let me show you what some agencies have done. The other groups that we will also mention is with Refugee Connect, which is Ken Myers, and just acknowledge Ken Myers in Brisbane as well. It is a very small agency. Ken's I'm going to say the CEO, accountant, business manager, and also coordinator as well. Compare that to Women's Housing, which employs about 30 plus staff, has multiple sites around Victoria, and provides women's and men's housing services and other health and wellbeing services. In contrast, Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative employs some 200 to 300 odd staff, is a large health and community services agency covering everything from aged care right across to justice, medical services and the likes. And what is common with all of these agencies, irrespective of size, is that they've got a COVIDSafe plan in place and how they've actually managed their events and the likes. We have, as a law firm, also for those agencies that are joining us, and some of the case studies I'll talk about, we've acted for religious groups, museum exhibitions, big breakfasts that are being coordinated as far as January and the likes, as well as volunteer groups and fairs and festivals scheduled to be conducted. And I'll draw on some of those as we go through. Now, first of all, as part of this, you'll see that you've got a event and workplace attendance register. So when we talk of community events, the one thing that all states and territories require you to have is essentially a event and workplace register. And this was one that we've actually utilized for some agencies. It's a template that was also put up by some of the departments. But essentially, you can see you've got the date, first name, phone number, check-in detail, check-out, what the agency's responsibility is, and what was the event that they actually had. In saying that, what we've done, and that tends to work well for smaller events where you know people around it. What we've also seen, though, and this was one of the problems that agencies quickly identified, was if you had a large group of people, you then have to have PPE for pens and use pens. And you'll see that in some of the medical services that you've gone into. How do you manage that whole process to make sure that people have actually kept a safe distance, and also manage to record their details as well? So what we have seen, and this is a resource of a real case example, is 2 different agencies. Essentially, on the right, what you've got is your COVIDSafe plan. In the middle, we've got the COVID workplace, COVID-19 safe work guidelines, and I've put that in the middle. And then we've got a series of forms. Some of these include the COVID daily assessment form, working from home form, workstation form, cleaning register forms that you have. And these forms you'll find are in your Gemba dashboard. And it's a tool that allows you to manage all of this. Now, what we've found is that when we talk of agencies like Rumballara, essentially they've gone from the start of this pandemic back in February, and staff and volunteers have actually filled out individual forms, daily assessment forms that show, and I'll show you what one looks like, what their symptoms are based on state and Commonwealth directives, and also around what symptoms they might have had. Now, on its own, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've got 200 or 300 odd staff essentially doing this each day, now when they look back and they've seen some of the screenings that have gone on, they've got some 15, 16,000 different individual points of contact that they can actually look back on. And that's a huge amount of data to actually see. Equally, we've seen the same with women's housing as well too. And what they've done is essentially put in the QR codes, and you'll see that down the bottom around this. And the QR codes effectively links to the dashboard now, and with it for each of their sites. So they've got a fair number of sites. I think it's about 15 or 20 different sites that they work from. And they've put this up on the front door. So when people go through, even if they're visiting some of the tenants or residents, they're essentially screening them as they go through and keeping a track of what's coming up. Now, I will just jump in and say we've got literally over the last few sessions, we've had some the support desk is looking at me, 4,000 plus agencies join us for these webinars. So just a brief introduction of also the context of how our law firm works, with some agencies joining us, and as I said, we've onboarded some 2,000 companies in the past few weeks alone. When we run these sessions and the legal sessions, just some information in terms of how we work, the legal work is fine, and you've seen the rules of what I've covered off today. What we have is, when I set up this law firm 10 years ago, the problem was that on taking the law and the rules and going, well, how does it actually work for my agency? So whether you're based in New South Wales, and I've just seen a question raised from David, who's based in New South Wales, coming from a not-for-profit agency, and saying, I was given notification today that all businesses must have COVID check in place, QR code as of Monday the 23rd in New South Wales. After some research, it seems it's only public customer-based businesses that must have it in place. While I think the QR code is a great idea, is it a legal requirement for all New South Wales businesses? So you can actually, and I'll come to that question in a minute, David, as well, but it really explains a point that I'm making here, that the rules and people trying to find the rules and the laws around it, unless you kind of see how the law actually operates and works in real life cases, then it's kind of pointless because you're always going to miss it. So what we've done with the GEMBA 360 compliance system, and it's open for all of the agencies, and as I've said, we've rolled out some 4,000 agencies in the last few months alone, and with these webinars that have come up, it'll give you the mobile applications that you need for a single seat to jump in. David, you'll be able to run your QR codes off it as well too, like women's housing are doing as well too, to be able to not only screen your staff, but also have it in place where you need it as well. Over this time, our law firm's been given, received Nadoc Awards, paintings from Indigenous and First Nation families as well too, which we're very proud of. But as I said, that's really around what our law firm and the works that our law firm does. So it is around that application of the legislation and the rules so that you can start using, I'm going to say, stuff today. So let's actually have a look at the legal compliance obligations around this. So when people often look at the events and programs, they often start with the plan. And some of the plans that we've seen around is around the industry safe plans. And this is an example of one that we picked up from Queensland last week. With it, it breaks it down and it overlaps with the Commonwealth directives. And this was something that Scott Morrison held up a number of months ago, essentially saying that as we go through COVIDSafe and as you're opening your businesses, then workplaces in each step must develop a COVIDSafe plan. Now, the COVIDSafe plan itself is a good idea around it, but what it comes up to is, well, what goes in it and how should it actually work for us? So what we have done is to springboard you into your COVIDSafe requirements. We've looked at the biosecurity legislation in the past. We've looked at and kept up to date with the Commonwealth directives as well as a safe work checklist, and created a series of self-assessments that your agency can start to use. And this gives you a summary of the legislation the policies in your relevant state or territory, and also the relevant Commonwealth requirements as well too. That essentially forms your COVID-safe plans, and that's the checklist that you can then identify for areas of improvement. And that same thing works for your industry plans. So what I mean by that is when you look at your dashboard, your Gemba 360 COVID-safe dashboard, you'll find these items in there all ready to go for you. And I'll show you what those essentially work through. Now, in the past, we have covered off in part one, which I'm not going to repeat here, around the work health and safety requirements for under the legislation for ensuring your COVID events are safe. There is also Public Health and Wellbeing Act requirements as well. Essentially, when we look at events, there are a number of challenges caused by COVID-19. And we see this from social distancing rules, and we see this across the different states and territories, and also the number of people coming together. Now, some agencies have, which we've talked in the past, around looking at hybrid or virtual events. And some of the mixes around this is whether you continue to run events such as virtual events like you might have done for your AGM, or a hybrid event where people can either attend a physical venue or through the online platform. Now, essentially what to think about when going through your events, and this rules is something, or checklist is something we covered off last week, and I'll just recover this because even with the new rules and picking up on what David was talking about, and also Judy as well too from Victoria, and David from New South Wales, and Sonia from Queensland as well too. So wherever you're based, essentially these 6 points is essentially what we're looking at when we cover those state laws that I covered off in the previous slides. So looking at, well, what are the rules? Does it apply to us? Does it not? Does the venue have a COVID-safe plan in place? Picking up Sonia's point, if they don't comply with it, raise it with them. There is an obligation for your agency to do so. Now, if they don't do that, then obviously raise the work health and safety issues and the likes. Then look at what services I'm running. And that will cover off from the slides that I covered off before. Can I maintain rules for safe work environment? So is it can I push it outdoors versus indoors? We had an agency raise, they wanted to have a workplace Christmas party. When we looked at it at the venue that they had, it wasn't actually feasible to do it indoors, but the moment they put it outdoors, they could actually do it. So there are options that you might have. It might be just the venue that you need to look at. And in terms of other things to consider, then yes, you do need to have a register of attendees and also have the COVIDSafe checks for attendees as well too. Now, what we mean by that, and let me bring this up, is to think about the physical distancing. Now, this is something that Safe Work have been pushing. You'll see in the past slides that they were talking about 4 square meters and also this 1.5 meter distancing rules as well too. Well, it actually comes from Safe Work, and it was something that has been pushed out from Safe Work for a number of months now as well. These guideline documents will also be circulated around, and a few people are asking where we can get those as well. So again, things for health, hygiene and safety checklists are also listed in your COVIDSafe dashboard along with your cleaning. So with it, as I've mentioned, the event and workplace attendance registers do work well for smaller groups, especially volunteer groups. What we're looking at now is what actually might work for yourselves if you wanted to have a larger number of people attend. So let's jump in and actually have a look at joining the dots on your COVIDSafe dashboard as well too, and how this actually might work for your agency. Well, when we look at this, as I said to you in the past, what we are seeing around this is essentially the works for your attendance listings and joining the dots for you. So when we did this, Ken Myers had used the COVIDSafe dashboard during his session, and also the registers came through for Rumbalara as well too. They had their module for their COVIDSafe system. They ran their policies. They had their COVID screening forms in place, as well as their HR registers as well. Same thing, there was a number of policy directives that they also raised, and a lot of these are now standard templates that the Commonwealth are actually utilizing as well. I will add to this that Rumballara was one agency that has gone through an identified hotspot in the last few months. So when they had a hotspot, and you'll see this covered off in our previous webinar where we covered this, they actually had the department come in, not to their agency, but to their suburb, and were testing and set up testing and screening clinics all around the local suburb and literally tested thousands and thousands of people within a few days. What Rumballara were able to do was identify exactly and show all the staff that they had actually screened. And I'll show you what the screening tool looks like that they've actually got each of their staff to do. And very quickly, it was impressed upon the department of how they've managed to keep all of their staff safe and meet all of their requirements by simply having a 30-second screening tool being done each day. They're now moving to the Gemba mobile app as well too, which even makes it faster for staff to do around this, covering a range of tools. In contrast, Women's Housing as well too has a QR code, and the QR code, they've put up these notices on different sites that they have. People are able to screen it, and essentially what it does is ask them a series of questions and essentially screens them for saying, here's doing the register of attendance, plus also asking them a series of questions on whether they have any COVID symptoms. And if they tick yes to any of them, then essentially they're not allowed to go in to the building, and that notice pops up for them to see as well. So let's jump into your COVIDSafe dashboard and see how this works. Now you'll get the logins for this essentially this afternoon as well too, for new agencies that are joining us today. You can click on the login to the Gemba 360 dashboard. It'll bring up this screen here, and your username and password will also be sent out as well too for those agencies that don't have it. When you go in, essentially what you'll see on the left-hand side is a number of tools. Now, the first tool that I'll talk about is the COVID Daily Assessment Tool. And this is something that Women's Housing and Rumballara and Refugee Connect are all using as well. What they've got, and a large number of other agencies, so what they've got here is essentially the checklist, and it's not a long checklist. Staff can all access it. There is a list of criteria that people are asked to complete and mark off whether they have any of these symptoms at all. And with it, you'll see that essentially when going through, this is the screening tools that they're actually using. It's listed by the date and the time that staff actually have done it. And also when they click on save, it'll register the date and the time. Here it is here, the date and the time that I've actually done it. Now I'm just logged in as a demo user called Fred Flintstone. And so with it, it gives you an idea of exactly what we're seeing. So the COVIDSafe tool that's there is accessible via the app. Your agency can start implementing this today to screen all of your staff, your volunteers, any contractors that come in. It allows you to manage that. Now, under the COVIDSafe plan that is also available to you around your events, when I click on the disaster module here, what will come up is this screen here. And I can update my agency name to your agency name when you log in, and that'll automatically set up my COVIDSafe plan. You'll see that we've got step 1, step 2, and step 3. And also what we've added in is the checklist for the events, being the client site visit, community event, and group class. And this is specific to your agency and where you are based. So if you wanted to go in and actually have a look at the individual steps, you can click on those, and you've got your checklist tools. Now this covers off all of your Commonwealth and state government based activities. So it will change based on which state and territory you are based in. The great thing about this is that when you go in and start marking it off, it'll actually give you the details, and it's almost like a client file case note that you might have seen. So if I've put in the information in here, and let's say I save it, then what it'll do is actually save this information and give me a footnote of what's been done and when. We've had agencies where the departments in different states and territories have turned around and said, where is your COVIDSafe plan based on what the Commonwealth has said? They've simply printed this out by clicking on the button here, and I'm doing this all in real time for you. And what you can see is the PDF version, here it comes here, of your COVID-safe plan. And I can generate that quickly at any time. And it gives you this ability to do it. With it, when you go back to the other part of the system, you can also access what we call the HR area as well. So for volunteers, staff, and the likes, you can click on the HR space. And what this gives you is the ability to actually run all of your, excuse me, I'll just log back in again around it. Here we go. It'll give you the ability to actually view all of your staff profiles, and people can actually go in and update their own profile, and it gives you the full HR register information here, and people can actually look at this directly from this. And so with it, it gives you the ability to manage all of your employees, members, especially because you're a charity-based agency, any volunteers that you have, and also board members, all from the one dashboard. And it allows you to manage this very, very simply and easily. With this, David has just asked, and it's a really good question from New South Wales, saying, has consideration been given to stop this becoming a trivial task that people do without any real thought or acknowledgement, making a tick and flick exercise that doesn't achieve a lot? Maybe a rotation of questions, mix of yes and no, expected answers, or similar. It's a really good question, David, and thank you for asking that. So with it, what we have done around this, and let me just bring up the pandemic form again. When people and staff go in, and you can give staff access to view and update their own form. So these questions, and you're right, do change as the law and rules of COVID change as well. So this is just an example of a form that we had put in some time ago, and we use it still for demo purposes. And it's a really good question that you ask, David, as well. So in some states, and this one was for Victoria, where the first set of questions is around, have you travelled into any hotspot areas? And there were, Victorian government some months ago, actually not some months, a few months ago, gave a list of postcodes that they wanted to track people on. So in fact, this form was updated just for the people in Victoria. These clinical questions as well too were also updated as well. And when we first started, when the pandemic first started, and we first set up this form, there was the questions, if you remember, going way back, where the Commonwealth gave directives on if you have travelled or recently travelled to certain countries. And so those countries were actually listed here, but these questions were not. So what you'll find is that this form actually changes as the laws and regulations change as well too for these screenings. So that way, what you're asking your staff or volunteers or personnel to actually complete is going to be what's relevant for your agency based on where you are and where those staff are based as well. Now, I think I can say that we've got one agency that Sonia, who's joined us today, Sonia's agency works right across Australia. And in saying that, there are slightly different rules for each of the, as Sonia pointed out, speakers that she might have traveling from state to state or territory to territory. But there are also different screening tools that people need to have. So each of those screening tools might be slightly different for different states or territories. And we might see that, for example, in South Australia versus Queensland versus WA. And that's currently even as it sits at the moment. So it's a really good question that you asked, David, around it. You'll find that, yes, they will rotate the questions. It also means that sometimes questions can be inserted that are specific to your agency. And also when we look at this as well too, the screening tools that you can go back to and actually have a look, and I can go all the way back to, let's say in this case, July, let me bring that up. And that you'll see that the questions are slightly different again to what I just showed you as well. So it's a really good question around that as well. The other part that you'll also find on the document part of the system is that with it, also some of the templates that other agencies have agreed to share is also listed here as well. Here are 2 of them as well around the work health and safety and policy documents. So on your dashboard, your COVIDSafe dashboard, what you do have is a full network of your COVID plans. You've got your HR access as well too. You've got your policies and also your pandemic forms as well. So it is a full set of resources that your agency does have access to. With it, we will be sending out the login details for those agencies that are joining us for the first time today. With it, what we do recommend, just to finish up before I open up the phone lines for any questions, and also the question panels, which we'll get to, review the policies that we've loaded in and sent around that. Create a task and measure against your COVIDSafe plans if you haven't already. You can identify the workflows required against your legal compliance obligations. And again, you can use these slides to do that. And if you have any questions, please contact our law firm, either on our direct 1300 number or my mobile, which is also available on Google as well too. If you Google my name and mobile number, it'll pop up, which is the 0413 699 515, and you can also email and support desk as well. We will open up the phone lines and stay on the line to answer any questions that you might have. If you are watching this webinar via our recording and YouTube channel, thank you for joining us today. If you did want to get your Jamba 360 login details, your Jamba 360 COVIDSafe plan login details, by all means contact us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@jamba360.com.